Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Filthy Geet. I've got Ronithm. And today I'm going to do my pick for March of the Mammoths. I read one book. I'm not even sure what the parameters are of March of the Mammoths. I think it has to be over 700-800 pages, something like that. So I've got the fifth in Anthony Trollope's Palliser series that I just finished this week, The Prime Minister. I'll talk about that in a second. So let me just tell you where I am with Trollope. I read the Barsetshire Chronicles. I have those there, which start off with a manageable The Warden, and I had this lovely sort of old, this was under the Penguin English Library edition, so it's Penguin, but it wasn't called a Penguin Classic, it was Penguin English Library. Then the second one, I had this a TV tie-in from the, where was it? It was BBC, did Barsetshire series, that's Donald Pleasance and Nigel Hawthorne on the cover. On the back we've got what's his face from Thing and Thingamy from Geraldine McEwen and Clive Swift on the back there. That was the Barsetshire Chronicles, so that's also Penguin but TV tie-in. Then for the third one, Dr. Thorne, I got this what they call the Penguin Trollope. So this is also published by Penguin, but this was in 1994. They republished, or Penguin published all of Trollope's works, and there's something like 47 of them, and numbered them in publication order. So this is the third in the Barsetshire Chronicles, but it's number 7 because it was his 7th novel. But I quite like the editions. I don't think they have as extensive notes, or maybe they do. I don't think they have the same. I don't have the notes in the back like the Penguin Classics. The next 3 I've got are all the sort of traditional Penguin Classics. I've got the Framley Parsonage, the Small House at Allington, and then the Last Chronicle of Barset. And these are the old, the previous version of Penguin Classic. This is my preferred one with the red bar. That's supposed to be a red bar. There's all faded different colours. They're all supposed to be this colour. And that's actually my preferred edition. And usually they have a good introduction and some notes at the back. Not extensive, but just brief notes, maybe 1 or 2 footnotes in a chapter. But sometimes handy. I won't swear to this. I often try to read the introduction in these just because it helps me frame where I am, and I don't read them consecutively, so it's good for me to catch up, see where we're at, and see what's going on. So that's the that is the Barsetshire Chronicles in 4 different editions, but all Penguin. At least they're all the same size and varying length. So the Warden seems so manageable, and then they get up to like 800-900 pages by the end. Then after that, I started the Palliser Chronicles, the Palliser stories. I don't know whether you, and that first one, that was Can You Forgive Her, which led to that fabulous track by Pet Shop Boys, well, excuse me. And then we get a sort of series of recurring characters, more I think even than the Barsetshire Chronicles, starting with Phineas Finn, and this is this is also the Penguin English Library, so this predates, I think, the Penguin Classics, maybe. So I've got one of those. That was the first one. Can You Figure It is like the traditional, my favorite edition. And Phineas Finn in this sort of beaten up thing that I think I picked up on eBay. Third one was the Eustace Diamonds, which has got lots of intrigue and that's 730 pages worth. And then Phineas comes back, Phineas Redux. And what happened? This is the Penguin Trollope, and I remember, this does something really weird, and I don't know why, and maybe someone who knows about how Trollope was published will be able to tell me why. But this is something like an 800-page book, but it does this weird thing with no explanation, and I don't think there's an intro here, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, that's the thing about these Penguin Trollopes, is they come with no introduction, no notes, but it runs for 440 pages. There's page 440. And then it starts again numbering from 1. I don't know why. And goes up to another 434. So that's 874 pages in Phineas Redux. And that takes me to where we are now. I just read number 5 in the series, which is the Prime Minister, again in this Penguin Trollope edition. So this would have been the 37th novel that he published. And I do think, so I've got one more to read in this of this set of 6, which is The Duke's Children, which I'm looking forward to, and I'll probably pick that up and maybe read that this year. And then there's one, the list of about 53 works altogether, of which I will have then read 12. And the last one is Trollope's autobiography, is number 53 in this series of poem, and I don't mind these editions, except they don't have an intro and notes. But they're good in the hand, and they're the same size as everything else, so they're great. I think I will read more Trollope if I can find them. If I can find them in a Penguin edition, because despite his anti-Semitism, I find this very readable. And the anti-Semitism, it's not like on every single page he's making Nazi salutes, but he just manages to slip in, at least in the last three of these, and less so in the Barsetshire Chronicles, but certainly in these Palliser books, just slips in comments about Jews. So, for example, in this story, there is a young woman who falls in love and marries, against the better judgment of all her friends and family, an up-and-coming gentleman with a slightly foreign-sounding name, Lopez. It's not sounds sort of Spanish and European. And it is everywhere. Every person who's bad-mouthing her suitor says, "Yeah, and we think he might be a Jew," as if that's the worst condemnation. Like, you can't be a gentleman and a Jew. And it's just there, permeating every part of it. And I've spoken before about the anti-Semitism and everything. And yet somehow I read these things and they fly by. There's a lot also, as you can imagine from the title, of British politics of the time, and a lot of back and forth about what the role of the Prime Minister is and how you get elected an MP. And it was a time when MPs weren't salaried unless they reached some sort of senior position. And so the only people who would become Member of Parliament, the only people who would become members of the British Parliament were already moneyed. Landowners or some independently wealthy, because you couldn't possibly afford to take this role on and all the commitment it required if you didn't have money. And so there's a lot about that, and at the end of the aristocracy, there's certainly no votes for women at the time. And I just sort of find it fascinating. So I enjoyed this. This does the same thing as that other book. So it goes up, first of all, to page, I'll tell you. It goes page 1 to 464, and then starts again from 1 and does another 470 pages. So what does that make at? 1 second. 470. So 400 plus 400 is 800. 64 plus 70 is another 134. So 934 pages. I bet this qualifies for March of the Mammoths. So story-wise, we said there's this woman who gets into an unfortunate marriage with Mr. Lopez, who turns out to be a chancellor. There's never anything established that he is actually of Jewish origin, but it's assumed because he's so foreign and swarthy and deals in business and untrustworthy that he must be a Jew. And she makes this marriage and then commits herself to it, despite the fact that he proves himself over and over again utterly unworthy of her. And that's one aspect. And the other part of the story going on is the Prime Minister himself, who a character who we've met in previous books. His name is Plantagenet Palliser, and the family name Palliser is the name given to this whole series of books. And Plantagenet Palliser was the heir to the Duke of Omnium, who in the previous novel passed away, and so Plantagenet Palliser is now the new Duke of Omnium, and his wife, Lady Glen, is the Duchess. And at the very beginning of this book, he had previously been the Chancellor of the Exchequer, so a man interested in political machinations, but he was very focused as Chancellor on decimization of the currency. This was his main focus and his obsession, and he was desperately trying to get it through. And we know that decimalization didn't occur until 120 years later. But that was his hobby horse when he was in Parliament. And of course, now that he's elevated to the peerage as the Duke, he can no longer sit in the House of Commons. And if you know that, in England there's a House of Commons and a House of Lords, and the Commons are all elected, and the House of Lords are given to the peerage, where they can sit unelected. And only in my lifetime, in the last 20 years or so, have there been attempts to reduce the powers of this unelected House of Lords. But as a now a Duke, he can no longer sit in the Commons, and he's kind of retired from public life a little bit until he is tapped by members of his party. The government has fallen apart, and we saw all that in the two Phineas books, Phineas Finn and Phineas Redux, where young man Mr. Phineas Finn tries to become a rising politician, and the Duke, Plantagenet Palliser, is tapped to form a government as Prime Minister, a coalition government, i.e. the parties have fallen apart. No one party has been able to garner enough support to lead in Parliament, and he is made the head of this coalition and takes the role. The Queen has asked him to form the government, and so he takes that responsibility very seriously. And we learn throughout the course of these 900 pages whether or not he is suited to the role, how his wife feels about this position, and what she thinks her responsibility is to make it work. And it's it's hard to describe a 900-page book as a romp, but it kind of does romp. Yes, it's a little repetitive. The two stories don't really overlap, except with one key point, which is fundamental to both. When Lopez tries to run as an MP in a constituency very close to Plantagenet Palace, as the Duke of Omnium's own home, but other than that, there's the love story, and then there's the politics, and it's it cleverly bounces from one to the other, but it doesn't. They were really two separate books, but somehow it holds together, and I kind of enjoyed it. And I each time I've read one of these Trollopes, I thought, yeah, well, I'll definitely do more of that. And this took me, I would say, about a week's worth of reading. So I got through most of it on the first Shabbat. I did about 400 or 500 pages of it, and then trickled a bit during the week, and then finished the last 200 pages the following week. So 7 or 8 days worth of reading. I don't think it's bad for a 900 plus page book. Even if I usually may do 2 or 3 books a week, I'm happy to commit to something that's so meaty and is rewarding. So that's my March of the Mammoths. The Prime Minister by Anthony Trollope. I have 1 more to go, and then loads more Trollope to read after that. I've done 12, as I say, 57. 53. Sorry, I may do the autobiography next. I know it's the 53rd of all the books that Trollope published, but it may give me more context if I go back and read some of the lessons. I mean, there are some more well-known titles, but there are some very weird ones. The first book was called The McDermotts of Ballycloran. Who knows who ever read that? Tales of All Countries, the first series. Tales of All Countries, the second series. Miss Mackenzie, Nina Balatka, Lotta Schmidt and other stories. I mean, there's a bunch of Trollope here that I've never heard of. But then there's a title which I'm more familiar. He Knew He Was Right. Rings a bell somewhere. What else have we got? There's another one. There's another famous one. Sir Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite. Has anyone read anyone other than Steve Donahue ever read Sir Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite by Anthony Trollope? If you have, comment below, and I will send you something. Rachel Ray, didn't know that one at all. So there's lots more Trollope to read. Got The Duke's Children coming up, and then maybe the autobiography, and then whatever else I can find on eBay going relatively cheap. Thank you very much. Have a good week. Bye.